First thing I want to say is Jeannie and I have never tried to have a collective conversation with this many people on Zoom, so bear with us if suddenly things go awry. Welcome everybody. I'm Joe MacArthur-Blair.
Jeannie Coquel.
And some of you, if you're on the first screen, will also see Amanda Butler, who is helping us with some of the chat and background kinds of things. And I can't tell you how amazing it is to just abide with colleagues all over the world for this conversation this morning and the two that are coming up.
And I'd like to start, before Amanda gives us a little tutorial on Zoom, I'd like to say that we're in Victoria, British Columbia, and we're honored to be doing this work here on the traditional lands of the Lekwungen-speaking people, First Nations people, also known as the Songhees and Esquimalt. And I know you are all somewhere in the world on some special land as well. So I just wanted to start with that. And then Amanda, maybe you could just tell people some key things.
And just before Amanda does that, you'll notice we are not 6 feet and 2 meters apart. We are business partners, life partners, and co-authors. So we get the rare privilege to cohabitate during this. So if you're wondering why those people aren't on separate screens, that's why. The model is a circle with a Venn diagram in the center. So in the center of that Venn diagram is hope, despair, and forgiveness.
Yeah, the three intersecting.
And as I said, when we started this work on resilience, we were really interested in what sustained people in challenging times. And that was really our focus. That's what we were writing about, and that was our focus. As we interviewed people, we realized there were two other powerful things at play. And that was the intersection of hope and forgiveness in their resilient lives. And we began to write on this kind of larger concept of the intersection between those three things. And today we're going to talk about the first one, which is despair. And because, not just because, but because we are appreciative inquiry practitioners and have been for an incredible number of years now, we began to ask ourselves the role of appreciative inquiry in this powerful notion of resilience and how we can bring to bear appreciative inquiry to that process. And so holding those three concepts is the notion of appreciative inquiry. And so we're just going to spend the teensiest bit of time on appreciative inquiry in case there's somebody with us who doesn't have any idea what that is.
Beginning with just the two words, appreciative inquiry. It's really the curiosity, the questions, the delving into the research of what's going on. That inquiry is so important. The kinds of questions we're asking is a huge part of appreciative inquiry. Generative questions, questions that'll take us further in our knowledge and what possibilities there are. And then the appreciative part is really just to value what's going well already, and in order to get more of what's going already well, and to also appreciate what is. And in the situation we're in right now, COVID-19 pandemic, of course, that notion of appreciate, it's a different world. So, think about and inquire into, well, what can we do in that world? And what is working well when we try things in this new world? We try to reinvent ourselves and be creative. And, for example, trying Zoom for lots of things. I mean, we've been using Zoom a lot, but not, as Joan said, in this sort of size. And we're already inquiring into how could we, in the moment, quick moment of despair when technology doesn't work, how else can we do this, right? So we appreciate what is, we value what's really our strengths and what's working well in the moment in order to get more of the goodness and the more of the creative ideas that we can have found that we can actually put into practice for ourselves and our work and our worlds.
And so we wanted to touch on a couple little notions in appreciative inquiry. There are principles that support appreciative inquiry. Many people who are with us today know them well, but there are two of those principles we thought we might draw out before we move more fully into the conversation about challenging times and the notion of despair. The first one is the notion of social construction, the ability for our words to create the experience that we're having. And one of the most amazing examples of that at this moment is You know, we started off with this notion of social distancing. And it only took, 48, 72 hours between people before people began to socially construct that into physical distancing and social connection. And that's the power of social construction, our ability to use words and language and images and metaphors to create the world as we reside. The second one we wanted to touch on, the principle, is the notion of wholeness. If there's ever a time in the world where the whole needs to come together to resolve what is going on in the world, it's this moment. Mm-hmm. And appreciative inquiry has that notion of bringing the wisdom of the whole together. And the only way in which we can, rise out of this pandemic is that notion of the whole world working together in tandem, sharing its resources, undertaking work together in order to do what needs to be done. So think about these three concepts of hope, despair, and forgiveness being held in that container of the powerful work of appreciative inquiry. David Cooper-Ryder has written about the kind of three tiers of appreciative inquiry. And the third, he talks about inquiring into the times of the tragic. How is it when you are in despair, you can inquire into the possibilities of what is happening before you? So I think we're going to launch into the notion of despair. Do you want to add anything first?
Yeah, I just want to add that all around that circle of all the different appreciative inquiry ways, from the principles Jones talked about to being AI, which is the whole notion of, reframing to see the strengths and what's working, and asking fabulous generative questions, to some of the tools that often people start with, like the 4Ds or the 5Ds, which is, really define what you want to inquire into, discover what's already working well in that, and dream further and design how to get there and then go and live it. And I want to just give an example of what's happening in the world right now is parents are homeschooling, and some of them are going, what do? I don't know anything about this. Well, how about you start with the family, whatever your size of homeschooling family is, and do it for all of you, including the parent. What's the best learning experience you've had? And tell stories about what that looks like, and share the excitement of what it means through those stories, and come out with some themes for how you could envision this homeschooling time together being an absolutely fabulous learning experience for all the family, and then figure out ways from those images to come out with steps to make that and create that and reinvent it as you go along, as you keep looking into what's working with us in this wonderful opportunity. My niece said, her kids said to her, I like this homeschooling better than going to school. And she's going, oh my God, gotta make it more boring.
And so let's move to that first circle that we're going to talk about today in that model, the notion of despair. There is an incredible amount of work always done on what words mean: hope, despair, and forgiveness. And so in our work, we attach ourselves to ideas that were intrinsic to what we were trying to explore. And so despair for us kind of has two big pieces of it. There's that notion of despair, which I'll get to in a second. There's also the notion of the glancing blow. And I think lots of us are experiencing that glancing blow right now. We're waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning with kind of low-level anxiety, like, am I going to get sick? Is my family going to get sick? Are people safe? Are my friends safe? That glancing blow of despair. It's not like it stays with us. And we find it in our work and our life, that glancing blow. And then there's that kind of larger notion of despair when we are literally brought to our knees. And despair is such a powerful thing. It's not like something we can just say, we're going to pull up our socks and get on with it. I'm going to be okay. Despair comes and abides with us until it's finished with us. Sometimes Jeannie and I jokingly talk about despair as a bad house guest. It comes, it eats all your food, it leaves its clothes lying all over the floor, and it will not go home. And despair is kind of like that. It comes and it resides with us. And so one of the things that Jeannie and I are really interested in our work is not the nature of the despair itself or the underlying causes of despair, because they are so many. It comes from our life and our work and the things being asked of us in the world. But we're interested in how we can amplify even the tiniest of strengths in those times of despair. And sometimes they are very tiny. You know, one of the things that I'm doing currently when I'm kind of feeling anxious is we have the incredible privilege here of living right on the ocean. And I can walk out my front door, down 2 doors to the ocean, across, up my laneway, and back in the back door. And I do that just for a moment to see the earth. And so it's the tiniest of strengths. And so we're really going to spend time, I'm going to send you into some groups to talk about this notion in a few minutes, this notion of how do we find the tiniest of strengths. And just to give a shout out again to Madeline Blair's work, Madeline really kind of talks about this as the choice point between an action and a reaction. And, you know, that tiniest of strength that we might amplify for ourselves and others. What do you want to add?
I want to add some notion about systemic despair in the sense of many of us have actual privilege through these times of living, you know, with restricted access, and we're still able to do many of the things we love. We work like this anyways, although we were supposed to be in San Diego training people this week, but we're reinventing that. And I want to say that it's important to recognize the power and privilege that some people don't have. And I just want to acknowledge that there are many stories in the world right now of people helping other people who are not able to help themselves at this time. So I think that's a really important thing, that surfacing some of those stories about the kindness in the world through the notions of recognizing that there are differences in terms of how we can handle this crisis that we're all in. And as simple as being old people who were in that threatened category of, you know, being taken care of. A couple of people got in touch with us, young friends. Amanda's one of them. She lives near us. And another friend who young said, can we help you get groceries and all the rest of it? And so far, we haven't had to have that kind of help, but it's nice to have Amanda helping us on this Zoom call as a fellow AI practitioner.
Amanda, we have somebody with a hand raised, so I think wants to throw a comment in. So why don't we go there, and then I want to say a couple more things about despair before we send people out to groups. It's Lisa.
I don't see the hand raised, weirdly.
Okay, so, Lisa K has raised her hand. So whoever Lisa K is, just
I'm gonna unmute her.
Unmute yourself and go ahead and say what you want to say, and just be brief.
Sorry about that. That's just a technical difficulty.
Okay.
Okay.
No and problem. You know, it's kind of like, you know, being a classic teacher. You're so excited when somebody in the classroom actually twitches and you call on them. Sorry, Lisa. So before we send you off to groups, I wanted to say a couple more things about this particular moment in history and the idea of despair. We experience despair ourselves, our own experience of despair. And when we work with people around despair, we ask kind of two powerful questions. You know, who in your life will reach down their hand and help you in this moment? And do you know how to reach down your hand and help someone else stand up at this moment? And when we think about despair, it never happens to us alone. We feel like we are alone in that place. But despair resides as a community event for us. And so I think we're going to send people off to talk to each other for a few minutes. I think we've talked long enough. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's good. We're going to send you off for about maybe 10 minutes. I think Amanda's going to figure out the groups, but because we don't have a PowerPoint, of course, you wouldn't see this anyways when you go to your groups. Here's what we'd like you to do. When you get into your groups, breakout rooms, you're going to first introduce yourself to your group, and then just tell a quick story about the strengths you're drawing upon in this challenging time of the COVID-19 pandemic. So just a little story that you can illustrate what it is you're doing well, because you're taking your strengths and you're applying it through this time. And how is focusing on those strengths fostering your resilience? So connect that to resilience. And then share again around the circle of your group, and in about 10 minutes we'll call you back.
How many people are urging each other to stay safe? How many people are looking for what's working? And I have yet to talk to anyone who tries to tell people how to infect others. No one does that. They talk about how you staying safe. What can I do to help you be safe? The entire world is being brought together by this thing. So there's something magical that's happening that I don't quite get, but I'm just as I speak to you all, I'm so impressed with the upward, I talk about this upward spiral, right? So just amazing things that happen that emanate from this energy coming together as a whole. That was my comment.
Thank you, Todd.
Does anybody else want to make a comment to the plenary or a whole? I notice this chat going by on this notion of grace. Grace is such a wonderful word, isn't it? The notion, it translates to many different languages as that idea of a state or a moment of the possibility of grace. You know, all these pieces, empathy, compassion, companionship, become part of our resilient selves, our appreciative, resilient selves in times of despair.
And there's a question in the chat about difference between optimism and resilience. I think resilience is the bigger umbrella of how we continue to evolve along in the world as it changes, and therefore we have to change. And optimism may be one way that we do it. And we'll probably talk more about optimism as we talk about hope tomorrow.
And, you know, the notion of optimism is really interesting, because it's kind of one of those words that people write on and create different kind of ways of looking at it. But optimism, if we think about it often, is an outcome. You know, I do something, I sit with a friend on Zoom for a while, I abide with somebody. And so I'm more optimistic. Whereas the things we do to focus on our strengths in times of resilience, they're inputs. They're things we put into what might be an outcome for us. An outcome for me might be optimism. An outcome for Jeannie might be to venture. An outcome for somebody else might be grit. An outcome. So, you know, we think about these kind of inputs and outputs in resilience work, and the ways in which things flow, but the outcome is very individual. The actions are very individual, often in resilience. Because, you know, one of the things that Jeannie and I talk about all the time is resilience is a practice. It's not a place we arrive at. It's not something we have. It is a practice. We get up and practice it every day in the hopes that we will be able to sustain ourselves, our families, our workplaces. So, to ask for patience and grace from my professors and fellow students, you know, I want to put a shout out to all the academics out there who've never taught online, who suddenly are. Jeannie and I have been doing a fair bit of, this is how you do this, even though this morning I couldn't get my PowerPoint to work. But
we're all helping each other.
Helping each other. Yeah. Jeannie, I think we're just running down time here. What do you want to say as we kind of bring this to a close? I'm going to read a piece of poetry actually to bring us to a close, but I'll do that last.
Well, I want to say that I'm really looking forward to the next 2 mornings as well, because mornings, afternoons, evenings, wherever you are in the world. One tomorrow on hope, and the.
So what you're saying is, for some people it might be yesterday, for some people it might be tomorrow.
Who knows?
Could be the day after.
And then the one on forgiveness as well. So just to say we're looking forward to continuing this. Has been very moving, very inspiring, as other people have said, to actually see and be with people from around the world who really care about the practice of resilience, the practice of appreciative resilience, in order to share with each other both the challenges and the what's working well with our ability to support each other around the world. And so we are a world community, and that is just phenomenal. And Joan's going to read a poem, aren't you?
And so I think
Wow.
we're going to bring us to a close. Jeannie and I are fine to stay after 10 o'clock if people want to chat
That's
with
our
us
time.
for a minute or two. We can stay another 10 minutes. It's 10 o'clock our time. And we wanted to end with a poem about the nature of time. And I think that one of the things that someone else said on a different Zoom call that I wanted to evoke is this notion of what story will we tell of this time, and the power of knowing and being afraid and being anxious and being strong and using our strengths and all those things mixed together in the practice of resilience. So I want to bring us to a close by reading a poem.
One of her poems.
Yes, one of mine. There are times you are called to a new way of knowing, and you are compelled to answer. There is no point in hiding under the covers, pulling them tight around your ears, hoping ignorance will reign. When the call comes, it is like a pry bar, tearing away what you have understood, dissolving what you thought you knew. You may crave the not knowing, but that time is past. It has passed you by. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We look forward to the next 2 days conversation tomorrow on hope, and the last day on forgiveness, and powerfully the role of forgiveness and hope in resilience work. And so for folks, you know from the event how to find us on our website. You can find materials there on appreciative resilience. Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay apart, stay socially connected.
And be appreciative, resilient, moment by moment.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
I'm very grateful. It's
Have
my
an
number
amazing
one
day.
gratitude today is all of you.